So in this video I'm going to talk about the cost of renewables and compare them to the cost of fossil fuels. Now it turns out that this is quite a tough comparison to do, and it's not straightforward at all. So what I'll do to get around that is, for our purposes here, I'll explain why that comparison is difficult. We'll go over some of the incorrect data that's out there so you can avoid it. At the end of the video, it's going to be a short video, but at the end of the video I'll list a sort of cheat sheet comparison of costs that's hopefully accurate. And then in other videos I'll break out respective areas like, say, wind power and nuclear in a bit more detail so we can look at the nuances of these areas. Now, how are renewables priced up? Well, basically, let's take an example of a wind farm. Let's say you were going to build a wind farm in the west of Ireland or somewhere. What you would typically do is sign what's called a PPA, a power purchase agreement. So that power purchase agreement may say, for example, that the utility agrees to buy the wind energy from you over a typical period of, say, 15 years at a certain price per kilowatt hour. And that's how the whole system works. But even within that, renewables are going to vary a lot in cost around the world. Let's take one example, solar energy and photovoltaic panels. If you were to put up a PV array in a sunny place like Arizona, that's going to pay for itself much more quickly than, say, a solar farm in a cloudy place like Alaska, simply because the solar gain in Arizona is far bigger than the solar gain in Alaska. And it's the same with wind power. Ireland, for example, is a much windier country than Germany, so a wind farm in Ireland will probably have a power purchase agreement that reflects that, and typically an investor in a wind farm in Ireland will get a much better payback than one in Germany as a result. Now, the setup of fossil fuels is quite different, because let's say you're building a gas plant or a coal plant, although nobody's building coal plants anymore. You've got to pay for the gas turbine, for example. But not only that, but you've also got to buy the gas then for the lifetime of the plant. And the price of energy in the international markets moves quite a bit and is quite volatile. So that's going to be reflected in your kilowatt hour cost. Other factors then also build into that: the cost of pollution costs. There's subsidies for both wind power and fossil fuels, and they can be quite complex to compare on a level playing field. Fossil fuels move with the exchange rate; they're priced in dollars. So if you have a gas plant in somewhere like the UK, where you're buying gas in sterling, the exchange rate's going to move your electricity cost. And then carbon taxes are increasing, and they're a moving target, and they're going to be built into your costs. To get around some of these problems, engineers often use a term called the levelized cost of energy. And for a layperson, there's a lot of confusing engineering terms in there. And even with levelized cost of energy, you can find different engineers in different countries using different units. So even that complication can have its own complexities, and that comparison is only as good as the underlying assumptions in the background, which have to be looked at really closely to ensure that levelized cost of energy is really comparing apples and oranges in a fair way. Now, I noticed when I was putting this video together that a lot of the information out there is out of date, and let's just give you an example of that now. I'm going to pull up a Wikipedia article here, which is cost of electricity by source, and if we scroll down to one of the graphs they give, you can see it's cost of electricity in 2013. So that's way out of date. Even without taking into account some of the other things I've said. If you look at the price of energy since then, it's really tanked. The oil price in 2013, and natural gas and coal have also changed price quite a bit since then. A lot of them are index linked anyway. Has really tanked. So I noticed that a lot of the information on the internet is just not really that accurate. Let's even look at some of the statistics websites. I pulled this from a statistics website I sometimes use. It's called Statistia, if I've said that correctly. And it shows the cost of electricity prices in 2015 by country. And it's got Australia up there at 49 cents a kilowatt hour. That just looks far too high to me. So if there are any Australians who are familiar with electricity prices listening, maybe you could post the correct data in the comment section below. Now the UK at about 21 cents a kilowatt hour for retail looks about right, and United States at 18 cents a kilowatt hour. That looks a little bit high to me. It tends to vary a lot by state in the US, but even so, those numbers look a little bit high side. You have to consider that the price of natural gas in US is much cheaper than it is in Europe. So let's just set the scene before we go any further and simplify things a bit and bring it back down to a real layman's term and look at how much I pay for electricity at home here in Ireland. And if you live in the US, you'll pay a little bit less. If you live in Germany, you'll pay more, but you get the general idea. So if I was to have, say, a brief shower, or turn on leave a 100-watt light bulb on for 10 hours and use 1 kilowatt hour of electricity, that would cost me about 19 US cents a kilowatt hour. Now, industrial prices are quite a bit cheaper, and in Ireland, say, electricity for, say, a large hotel or a manufacturing plant will cost about 12 cents a. But if you strip out the taxes and the transmission and other fixed costs in that, it turns out that if you look at the price at the actual power station gate, the cost of electricity generation, all methods, varies from about 4 cents to 7 cents a kilowatt hour, depending on the price of energy on the international markets, how much wind power is on the grid, and a number of other variables. So bear that in mind, that even though that you're paying actually a lot more for your electricity than that, most of the cost in your electricity bill is actually not the cost of generation. So now that we understand that background, let's look at what I believe is a pretty fair comparison. So the cost of gas, so typically around the world what you would see, this is US cents by the way, not Euro cents. The cost of gas gas generation for electricity is about 4 to 6 cents a kilowatt hour. The US would be on the lower end of that range because the US has much cheaper gas prices than either Europe or Asia. So, and it's fair to say a lot of the new electricity capacity that's been going in around the world has been both renewables and gas as well, because gas is still pretty competitive. Now, nuclear has got a pretty bad reputation, and I believe deservedly so. It's very expensive, and those sort of costs don't even begin to take into account the horrendous problem of the waste. On top of that, those costs are in that range only because a lot of the construction costs for the existing plants has already been written off. If you were going to build a new nuclear power plant, the cost would probably even be considerably higher than that there. And another time I'll make a separate video on nuclear. It'd be quite interesting. Coal is similar to gas, maybe a little bit lower, but that cost for coal doesn't take into account the terrible pollution that comes with coal. And there has been a lot of talk about CCS, which is carbon capture storage, to alleviate the global warming effects. But that's never been achieved economically. Any time anybody has tried it, the cost of coal became totally uneconomic. So I don't believe we'll see CCS now. I think it's pie in the sky, and it's a technology that's not going to happen. And on top of that, there's no need for it. Now, if we look at wind onshore, at the moment it's around 5 to 8 cents a kilowatt hour. In Ireland, it would be up near the 8 cents a kilowatt hour. But the costs have really been coming down a lot lately. Now, wind offshore is much more expensive because of the difficulty of operating at sea, and also the turbines are much bigger. But it has some advantages as well I'll talk about in a subsequent video. Now, the good thing about wind offshore is the prices have been coming down dramatically, and there's a couple of new developments coming in wind offshore that's going to bring those prices down even further, and that's very good news because there's a tremendous amount of energy to be harnessed, and it's also can be done in a way that doesn't raise local concerns about putting up wind turbines in an eyesore way. Now, another tremendous success story has been solar. It's probably fair to say that the cost of solar up to date has been around 6 cents a kilowatt hour, but costs have been coming down very, very fast, and there's even been recent examples in high solar gain areas of the world, like United Arab Emirates in Dubai, where the projects have been signed with power purchase agreements in the region of 3 cents a kilowatt hour, which would make it even cheaper than most gas plants worldwide. It's sort of ironic that the Arabs, as well as having the best fossil fuel resources in the world, also have some of the best solar resources in the world, and they're actually being investing in that. So it's quite interesting that they're doing that. Okay, I'll wrap it up there, and many thanks for watching. I like this whole area of technology, renewable energy, so I'll post some more detailed videos when I get some time. And if you like the video, please hit the like button, and I'll see you soon.